From the center of the universe, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, this is the SDM Show with your host, Rob Cairns. The SDM Show focuses on business, life, productivity, digital marketing, WordPress, and more. Sit back, relax, grab your favorite drink, and enjoy the show. Here is Rob.
Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. I'm the founder, CEO, and chief creator of Amazing Ideas at Stunning Digital Marketing. In today's edition of the SDM Show, I have my friend Tom Finley joining me. And Tom and I are going to talk about modern WordPress. What is modern WordPress and what is the future of WordPress? Sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast. This episode of the SDM Show is sponsored by Stunning Digital Marketing, the agency to handle all your WordPress website security needs. Go on over to stunningdigitalmarketing.com and find out how we can help you secure your website so you no longer have an issue with backups, being hacked, or your website being compromised. That's stunningdigitalmarketing.com. Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. Today I'm here with my guest, Tom Finley of Proof Creative. How are you today, Tom?
Great. Thanks, Rob. How are you?
Doing well. We had a lot of good chat before we went to record, and I think this will be a great enlightenment for the listeners. I like to start by asking people, what's your WordPress origin story, and how did you get into WordPress?
WordPress origin story. So I was an HTML guy for a long time. Didn't really get into CMSs that heavily, and a friend of mine was really big on writing, fiction stories and personal blogging, and basically said, "Hey, can you set this up for me?" And I did that, and I supported it for a few years, and kind of like went on my way doing other things. Was an in-house designer for a company that didn't use a content management system, and then eventually got into movable type, and at some point I needed a job. WordPress was getting really popular, so I started basically experimenting with WordPress, and I remember my first paying client was my dad, and I built a theme for his HOA on Kubrick, and then a buddy of mine needed a website, and I built his theme on it was Automatics offering Theme Shaper. I can't remember for the life of me what it was called. Yeah. But did a couple more of those sites, and ended up at a small agency in Hagerstown, Maryland. And they introduced me to Genesis, and that really, I guess, that's my supervillain origin story. Once I got a hold of the Genesis framework, that's all she wrote. That's pretty much all I used. Been doing this now since I think 2010 as a job. WordPress since maybe 2006, since it was a wee baby. So I've been at it for a while now.
Yeah, you started your agency about the time I did, so we're kind of in the same age group there. I started mine in 2010 as well, so that's interesting.
Well, I'm on my second agency. I shut the first one down, and started working for other people again. This may have a little bit more staying power, and I really feel the energy. I don't know if you want to call it like the full site editing movement, the block movement, but I definitely believe when Brian Gardner and Nick Diego say that there's really never better a time to embrace this paradigm shift, I believe that.
I agree 100%. I think blocks are the future. I think full site editing is the future. and the future's now. I really believe that. I remember when blocks dropped, Gutenberg dropped at WordCamp US a number of years ago. WordCamp Toronto was the weekend before. And when word got out it was going to officially drop at WordCamp US, I kind of shook my head and said, I want no part of this. And then I made a decision about a year and a half ago as things matured. I want a big part of this. And because of guys like Brian Gardner, Nick Diego, and many others, it's made the transition to blocks really easy, I think.
It has. I remember, I guess I don't remember specifically like where I was when I first heard about blocks and, when I first started actually touching them in the editor. But I also do remember slapping Gutenberg ramp on everything, like my life depended on it. Because, I was definitely unwilling to embrace the technology at that point. And I think that, we're probably talking about when did it actually come out? 2019?
Yeah, 2019.
Yeah. So there's still a lot that needs to be done in Blockland, and I certainly don't want to malign anyone's effort. I really admire all the work that the contributors have done and the plugin and theme developers. Sort of one thing informs another. Brian Gardner and I were talking about Genesis blocks the other day. There are so many elements of plugins like that have found their way into core, right? But it's taken 3 to 4 years in some circumstances. So we have some miles to go yet, but I'm definitely not as fearful. And have some, and I have one really hefty publication site running on blocks. So it's a little late for me to back out now.
So what I'd like to ask you is that publication site, when you went to blocks, what did that do for your speed scores? Because one of the things I noticed, and I talk about quite frequently, is the minute I dumped my page builder on my site, which at the time was Beaver Builder with an Astra theme, and I cut over to Cadence and Cadence blocks, my speed scores went up by 10 points. And I talk about that quite a bit because it did wonders. And I've actually got the screenshots before and after to show it. When people say, nah, it couldn't have, I said, well, it did. What did that do to your speed score on that publication site?
So the site is dcbeer.com. I'm allowed to talk about it because I'm a de facto contributor to the site. Okay. They were running, I want to say it was WP Bakery Visual Composer, and a theme Pensy that was specially made for that. And as far as WP Bakery Visual Composer themes go, it actually was a surprisingly good theme. But in switching over and pulling the trigger on the live site, it was actually a pretty significant update to the theme that I use for it, which is an I-Know theme from Elma Studio. They released a theme update that increased the speed score even more. But I want to say that it's like a 20 or 30 point difference for the dcbeer.com relaunch. And especially for mobile. The speed score isn't as good for mobile. It's pretty image intensive site, even though it's mainly content. But it's still ridiculously dramatic on both dimensions, mobile and desktop. And I think it depends on your caching layers. So I use WP Engine. They have the object-oriented caching. They also have CDN. That's, I think, now backed up by Cloudflare.
Correct. Yep.
Powered by Cloudflare. So yeah, it's night and day difference. Visiting that site on a mobile device is just a huge shift for the readers. It's a huge shift for even the other contributors. They quite often tell me that this is a major major upheaval in a good way.
Yeah, it is, and I've been I'm glad you shared that story, because I've kind of been stressing with clients, with other people in the WordPress community, that one of the compelling reasons to go to blocks is the speed scores. And unfortunately with Google, it matters so much today. And mobile speed scores matter even more, because we all know over 50% of your web searches are done on a phone or a tablet, an iPad or an Android tablet. I mean, I don't know about you, but I know when I browse the web, if I'm sitting around at night, I've probably got a phone or a tablet on my lap, if not both, and not a PC or a Mac at the time. So.
I definitely am a phone first guy, but it's very contextual for me, right? So,
yeah.
With DC Beer, they write a lot of long form content. Well, a decent amount. Let me reframe that. So it depends, and if I'm on something like the Atlantic or one of those sort of heavy hitter kind of long form content type of sites, I generally will send the page to my desktop browser and read it later. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that there is any site for a modern business publication nowadays that isn't getting at least 25 to 50% of their traffic from mobile devices, period. Right.
Yep.
I'm not going to pretend that I'm particularly gifted at persuading people to upgrade to blocks, because a couple times I've attempted it, they just weren't getting it.
Yeah.
But it's significantly faster and better for me, and I feel like a lot of that conversation around the democratization of websites.
Mm-hmm.
You have an org or a business that you need to have a website. You need to have a website that you can edit. It really is finally borne out in the form of blocks, right? I mean, before it was short codes, didn't really cut it. A lot of us made do with advanced custom fields or pivoted like you to like Beaver Builder and Elementor, which is fine. But having managed some fairly large content-driven sites, there are problems with doing that.
I would agree with you. There's big problems. And it's funny, you mentioned Beaver Builder. Before I went to Beaver Builder, I was playing with Headway, if you remember those days. There's it from the past. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. And I mean, they seem pretty promising too, right? Yeah, I actually, I guess to brag about some other sites in my portfolio, as it were, I was hired circa 2014 by Shenandoah University to help migrate their site to a more modern WordPress paradigm. And the company that they engaged, and it was like only a year or two before they hired me, to redo their existing site that I was inheriting. It was based here in Alexandria, Virginia. WDG did really great work. They set the site up on Carrington Build, which was, I think it may have been one of the very earliest visual builders, right up there with like Visual Composer. Mm-hmm. And we spent a year extracting all the content from the database, basically. Or, well, it was more really just copying and pasting from one instance to another, and putting as much in the WordPress editor as we could, using some short codes for situations where we needed, like FAQ, accordions, etc. And then later I ended up rolling some homebrew ACF solutions to help them manage their their curriculum pages. But yeah, I mean, it all started with they knew that they were stuck. They were afraid to upgrade, right?
Yeah.
Because of how tightly coupled their theme was with this early builder. And I think that touches on another aspect, not just what's going on with your content in terms of the code, but what's happening with the theme. With a lot of block themes, even if the blocks aren't necessarily available to another theme, you can still switch, right? And your content is largely intact. And I do have a thing that I say to people, and I'll be really like forthright about it. When you tell me use Beaver Builder or Elementor to build your sites, I don't have a problem with that. But to me, those aren't necessarily WordPress sites, right? Because the way that the data gets stored makes it infinitely harder for me coming behind it to get it out.
No question. I mean, I know when I moved my own site, what a painstaking task it was. And I was sharing with you, and I've shared on this podcast, I did it on a live site. Mistake number one. Mistake number two was at the time I was hovering around 180 podcast episodes. So that was why I did it on a live site, because the blog posts had to be done one at a time. And I changed my podcast host at the same time in the middle of it, which I'm no longer with. And I did all that all at once. And it was just like, it is a job to go from a page builder to blocks. It is a lot of work.
You really shot from the hip on that one, didn't you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, I did. Yeah.
Well, I can't blame you, though. I mean, sometimes you just want to get it done. And also, it probably held your feet to the fire a little bit, right? But it's okay, because it was your site, right? You didn't have a client coming after you angrily with large scissors, right?
No, not at all. I've had enough of that lately, for other reasons that we shall not discuss. Yeah.
So you told me you're a big Cadence fan.
I am.
How did you arrive to that?
I looked at a number of themes, and like Genesis Box was in my repertoire at the time, was in my radar. And I just, at the time, there was a pile of stuff that Cadence was doing, and that they were going to jump long-term in a roadmap into the Woo space. And I just said, okay, that's it. I'm in with Cadence. And that was what did that. Now, I should also say, just from an interest standpoint, I'm also a little bit in with iThemes for some other stuff, which is also in the Stellar family. I'm an RCP user, Restrict Content Pro. I'm a iTheme security user, and believe it or not, I'm a Backup Buddy user. So that factored a little bit into it as well, that I already had stuff in that ecosystem. So it just made the choices a little more easier for me. What is your box stack?
So it depends. I started off really leaning heavily into Frost, from Brian Gardner and Nick Diego. And I was on a webinar or something of that nature with Brian and Nick, and Nick said, Oh, you want to know who's doing something really cool and ingenious, not just with their blocks, but with their business? And of course, you know me, I'm like, yes, I do.
Yeah, of
and
course.
he dropped a link to the I know themes, which is AINO, for your listeners. And I went and I checked them out and used their free theme, the I know theme. And I think I used it for about a week for free, and then I spent the 100 or whatever for their preliminary membership offering. And I would say it's well worth it, especially for if you want to make a designer's site. That's what I really favor, because they've got just this uncanny, really, WordPress way sort of set of design controls for the blocks, but it's all based with Flexbox and Grid.
Mhm.
Um, they have ways of assigning attributes to blocks, whether that be like margins, padding, even font sizes, that you can assign an entirely different set of attributes depending on the breakpoint.
Yep.
And before WordPress core even had their modular type scale built in, I know had figured that out.
Mm.
So what you get from that are these really beautifully fluid sites, and I have to tell myself I'm a little spoiled. I've been working with Brian Gardner's Bright Mode for my portfolio theme, which is a wonderful theme. Very few failings, but I find myself wanting to add certain types of things like margins and padding that aren't active, I guess in core. And it just goes to show you that there are plugin developers out there and theme developers out there that are really sensitive to the needs of their customer base.
I would.
And they're not content to wait for the contributors to add all that stuff. They've done a fantastic job, specifically I know. So along the lines of Cadence, I'm an event calendar customer.
Yep.
I'm also an RCP subscriber for a couple of my sites, and I think they make good stuff. I'm really interested in checking out Cadence. I think one of the interesting facets of that iThemes dynamic is that events calendar has really held back a lot, and in terms of converting their templating system to blocks, and experiencing it firsthand. It's a little frustrating. I can't fault them for the business decision. I'm not in that org, right? But as a user, I have a couple different ways that events show up, relative to blocks. And the templates are all very much PHP driven. So it's been an uphill battle. And I'm hoping that relationship with Cadence tightens up and they can really get on the same page.
Yeah, I think it's headed there. Knowing who I know over there, and a little bit of a disclaimer for listeners, Kathy Zant, who's the marketing lead over at Cadence, is a good personal friend, and I think it will tighten up, because I actually think Ben Rittner, and I was saying to you before we went to record, I think he's a really good developer. And he knows what he's doing, and he's passionate about his products. So, and he was the founder of Cadence, and I think he's got his head screwed on where it needs to be, and he's listening to his users. And to me, that's really important. I'm not saying others don't. I just know Ben is. The other thing I'd throw into the mix, and I failed to mention, is I also run a cool little plugin called Editor Plus by Extendify. And many people are aware of Editor Plus. And I just find that it gives me some styling quick options that are not in core right now that I can do really quickly. And to me, that has saved my bacon on a few design projects already. So,
Where were you last week?
I was on vacation.
Could have used this week, Rob.
Yeah, I know. I was on vacation till I showed up on Friday, as you know. So, yeah, I know. It's like, and we all toy. And I know you were talking about padding, and it was interesting because, if I recall right, you were at the time of this record today. You were on got into a Twitter conversation about exactly padding. Somebody had a question, and it always seems to be an issue right now if you're using Core Box. Like, it's just, we need the add-ons, right?
Yeah, we do, and I mean, there's the added, I guess, bonus. One of the reasons I stopped going bleeding edge was because I got bitten in the butt by running Gutenberg on the production site, and this current iteration of Gutenberg, circa 14.0.3, has additional padding attributes that you can give to blocks, but they're not backwards compatible. And I actually started, I think, experiencing block corruption as a result.
Yeah.
So I really backed off of features that I knew were more experimental.
And I'm running the Gutenberg plugin on production sites, so there you go.
But yeah, between the layout shifts and a couple of other issues, I mean, I know good things are coming down the pipe in that regard, but I've had to just kind of take a step back and tend to my flock, as it were, using exclusively Core, and just accept the fact that I wasn't going to have the bells and whistles. But good stuff is coming down the road, and the more it stabilizes, the longer that those features stick around, the more stable plugins and themes will be. Mm-hmm. So really, I mean, for me, the thing on the horizon that I'm looking towards altogether really is stability, because that informs what we can put in front of clients, right? And reliably so, because there are clients that I know that can handle the block experience right now, and then I have other clients that I know there's no way that I can do that. It just wouldn't be fair to either of us. So, I'm looking forward to the discussion that we're going to have this upcoming Friday on WP Build Mode.
Yep.
Plug for them, I think, about block locking, hopefully.
I hope so too, because you know where I stand on that one. Yeah. I think,
and what I'd like to see kind of come out of that is, or at least in the future, is maybe global settings that we could import from one site to another site. Because I know one of my pain points with blocks is having to sort of re-architect the same stuff. Where with like Genesis, I totally had my own starter template, and I don't really have that with the blocks, because the content is so deeply intertwined in what's being laid out in the code for blocks, and I'm not there yet. Like, I don't know how to author on the theme and the block side.
Yeah, I hear you on that one. I think blocking's an important part as we move forward. I've already gone through one occurrence where I had a client who had admin rights, whose intern didn't have admin rights, and then convinced the client he needed admin rights to do what he wanted to do without going through me. Well, the problem is, with block locking in the current format, he decided to move stuff around on me. And you know how well that went, don't you? And then I had to wrap the client's hand, and this particular client's a good friend of mine. He runs a retail store, and his wife's his business partner. And I looked at his wife and said, I'm taking away admin rights from everybody, and if you don't like it, you can go elsewhere. and I took away admin rights from everybody but me. And so I think block hawking has to go in. I think, we got to think more with clients about what we do with user roles, and do we give clients the whole kitchen sink, or do we only give them what they need so that they protect themselves from themselves, kind of deal? I think we got to really start thinking that as designers and developers. I really do.
I agree. My mind has definitely started to head that way as well. I have not had to be as concerned about it for many years. Even when I was running that university site,
Yep.
the user roles were not a terribly huge source of concern. And now I think that you have a lot more nuance within WordPress regarding user roles, because like WooCommerce, you have shop managers. I think you have a couple of different tiers of users there. Also a Newsletter Glue customer. Shout out to Leslie from Newsletter Glue.
Love Leslie.
They have, outstanding job with that plugin and keeping pace with the block evolution. I don't know if they sleep, but at any rate, they have they have a newsletter manager role, and with the capabilities that we now have for these sites, running entire educational institutions or even enterprise websites on them, it certainly is necessary to codify an approach to user roles, and definitely make sure that there are portions of these sites that can't be disrupted, through even the best of intentions.
No, I agree with you. I wholeheartedly agree with you. And while we're talking about user roles and block hawking, we were sort of talking beforehand and said, maybe we should jump into security. So it's just a good segue at the time. What do you, and I know you're with WP Engine, and we all know in our business, security is based on trust, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. What do you use besides WP Engine as being your partner in security? Do you do anything special?
Not really. It pretty much is exclusively trust in that platform. What I can say to that is that I ended up on WP Engine partially because I've a fairly shrewd mind about when I'm going to land in hot water, and I have been warned when I started the role at Shenandoah University that they were undergoing a lot of ongoing DDoS attacks, hacking attempts, etc. And so, they'd really been through Cloudflare and Rackspace. When I relaunched the site, we moved to some allegedly white glove hosting company in Baltimore. And I got to the point where maybe 6 months later, it was definitely the summer. I remember it being hot, and I'm very unhappy when I'm hot anyway. and the university site was not being well trafficked by students because it was the summer, but it was crashing about 10 times a day. And I had to get on the phone to have them manually reset the server every time it went down. And I had already begun hatching a plan to migrate the site. A very good friend of mine, his name is Aaron Collegeman. He used to work for a company called Squidoo. He's kind of a big name in PHP, I think. Aaron helped me leapfrog to WP Engine. I think we migrated in under a week or two.
Wow.
And as soon as we migrated to WP Engine, it all stopped.
Yep.
So I have no doubt that there was some byproduct of the DDoS attack that we were suffering from. And to fast forward into my next role, I work for a B2B telecom selling commercial internet and VoIP services to other businesses, and they're constantly under attack, and from a lot of different vectors, right? And WP Engine just worked.
Yeah,
and so I really I haven't felt inclined to add another layer. And this could just be pure ignorance on my part, but there really, so many years of pain, hacks, etc., that I underwent before, it just all evaporated, right? So if there are recommendations about things I should be doing, maybe you can tell me what your favorites are and why. I know you're big on security, so.
Yeah, it's interesting. I understand the DDoS attacks. For many, many years till I offloaded it, I maintained a site for the Ontario Police Association for the provincial memorial that they use for live streaming. And every year during the ceremony, and I got out of that about a year ago, I did it pro bono because of a number of people I knew. And I did it for over 10 years. And I can tell you, every year during the police ceremony, which is the first Monday in May, you should have seen the DDoS attacks if I looked at server logs. While the ceremony was going on, I used to sit outside the production truck with a tablet in my hand, trained on the server, watching what was going on. It was that bad. There's enough police haters out there. And in all the years we did it, I don't think the server ever came down once. Now I use a server in a data center, which helps. On the software side, I do a couple things. I do backups at the host level, at the server level. I also do
You have to do backups at the host level.
Yeah, I also do backups at the site level. I do both because I like redundancy. The backups at the site level I do daily, and I keep them for 3 months. The backups at the host level, I offload 3 times a week. I keep those for 3 months. I have some custom scripts that kind of do stuff for me. And then, so the backups at the site level, I'm using Backup Buddy at this point in time. It seems to work for me. It works fine. It's not perfect, but that's why I do redundant backups. Now, what I would say to people about backups is, please, folks, if you're doing backups, do a restore before you need it to a staging site or somewhere. Like, don't think just because you're running backups are good. I've seen cases even in healthcare where backups we thought we good weren't good. So make sure you test them before you need them. The other thing I do really well is I run iTheme security at the software level in conjunction with PatchStack right now. And between the localized firewall that PatchStack provides and iTheme security just lets me tweak some settings real quickly so I don't have to tweak them manually, basically. And I also use it on many sites to invoke 2FA. I think on high-risk sites, I would even say any site, if you can convince your users to do it, 2-step authentication is the way to go. I certainly run that. And then on the management side, I use self-hosted main WP. I've actually got 3 main WP installs running on 3 separate domains, and that's all they run, just to manage all this stuff real easily at an overview. And at this point, I'm still using Uptime Robot to check for site staying up and site staying down, and that seems to work okay. So I'm running like a multi-layered approach for me.
Nice. I do use an uptime monitor that I think is relatively new. I believe it's called Better Uptime.
Yeah, they have a really good
BetterUptime.com.
Yep.
Yeah, they have an interesting product suite, but their free tier is very generous, and I think that their paid tier is well worth it as well. Whatever volume of sites for each given tier is probably beyond generous if you're just talking about uptime monitoring.
Now, what I'll also
been really pleased there.
What I'll also say is, people always say to me, "What do you think about WordFence?" And personally, I think I was a WordFence customer for a long time. I think their product is so bloated right now, and it's a resource hog, and it actually slows sites down. And I don't know. I don't think they're as in tune with the community as some of the other security providers. And for me, that's a big issue because I think what makes WordPress strong is our community. And I think being in tune with what the community is asking for and what they need is really important. So,
yeah, it's been a good many years since I've worked with WordFence. At the time, the agency I worked for, we had great need for them.
Yep.
But we definitely did run into various problems. I have sort of same feeling about Jetpack when you're talking about bloat. And, if you're introducing things, especially if it's a rather heavily trafficked site on the admin side, with a lot of users, you have two-factor authentication, you have security software that's slowing your site down. You really have to take into consideration that back-end user experience. So I had some experience more recently with two-factor authentication, but it was all email-based.
Yep.
And I really just don't like that experience. One, because email is not terribly secure. If you're owned, probably higher probability your email is going to be owned. But I like the authenticators over anything, right? Just don't make me authenticate via YouTube. I don't know why Google does that. It's so bizarre.
Yeah, and I'm with you on the authenticators. I run both the Microsoft one for Microsoft apps because it's easier. And then everything else I channel through the Google Authenticator, and it works seamlessly without a problem. And I've even got the Authenticator running, believe it or not, on my smartphone and on my tablet. So if one goes down, I'm not SOL up a creek without a paddle, so to speak. And I wouldn't go like for high-risk sites, e-commerce sites. I think it's a great way to go to protect your user. And I think you just got to educate site owners and say, this is in your best interest. So please, 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 let's try it. Because I think it makes a difference.
Yeah, and forcing strong passwords. I mean,
yep.
I really cannot fathom why that's not built into core. Because that should just be a default. But forcing strong passwords is really key. And I'm a big LastPass fan. Despite their product is getting a little long in the tooth, but it has worked pretty well across multiple devices for me for a good many years. So
it's a great product. I think the top three password managers, in my opinion, are LastPass, Bitwarden, which I use, or 1Password on a Mac. That's the other one. I think running a password manager is great. I use random passwords. I generate them random. The only two passwords I can remember, and people laugh at me, is my email password and my Bitwarden password. Everything else, I have no clue, including the password for my online banking. I have no clue what it is right now. I just generate them.
I'm not going to give away the keys to the castle, Rob, but yeah, I'm pretty much up there. I think I might have a couple
Yeah.
that I've either recycled or from
Okay.
memory, but by and large, yeah. I mean, and as for what we've been doing, as long as we have, it's really not reasonable to do anything but use a password manager. I don't know how people function without them, to be honest. I actually upgraded an entire phone. I had an iPhone 10, and the Face ID chip in it went bad.
Oh no. Oh no.
And yeah, that's possible. You can drop them enough times that the Face ID chips go bad, right? And so it stopped being able to not only unlock my phone via my face, but I couldn't access my passwords as quickly. And I do some social media management for some clients, and um, just things like online banking, etc. I didn't have that quick access to Face ID to get into the password manager quickly, and it really screwed me up. So,
I'm sure.
we reached this point where we have these complex, sophisticated digital lives, and I think that you're spot on. We've got to incorporate our security practices with WordPress into those protocols, right?
Yep.
It's just I would love it if I could use Touch ID or Face ID to get into a site and just not have to think about it beyond that.
They're
That really is, I think, the holy grail, right?
Yeah, and they're making changes. I know with iTheme Security Pro to try and eliminate passwords through that type of methodology. I haven't played with it yet, but the other cool thing iTheme's Security Pro will do is real easily it will force admins to change their password. So my admins hate me because I set all their sites that they have to change their password every 60 days. I
No.
do. I take the corporate way of coming out of an enterprise environment where I'm used to changing passwords, and I force it on my admins and say, here you go. And by the way, you better use a password manager because then you can update your password manager. Yep. I force that on. They love me. But again,
Well,
it's another step.
suffice to say, I'm not there yet. I don't know if I'll ever be, but I'm not going to hate on you for it.
No, I'm just anal. That's all. And I think the other important thing is, and I talked about this, was I keep backups for 3 months, and everybody says why. Well, let me share something. You could have a code injection today, a vulnerability hit, and the payload can sit there dormant for 2 months. And what happens if you have to go back? And that happens more than people think. People infect sites and just leave it there until they need a bot farm, a bot attack, and then they invoke. And I think keeping a week of backups that are current is not necessarily the best protection out there, personally. But
Yeah, that seems totally reasonable.
yeah, so that's a little bit about security. Now, and we've had a lot of good discussions in the builders group that WP Engine does, and if you were going to suggest to somebody that we're going to say, okay, I want to jump into blocks today, what would you suggest?
One, download local WP.
Yep.
Do not, do not create learning environments on remote servers. Personally, my favorite thing to do for learning blocks is I have a site, or not a site, but an instance on local WP that is a multi-site instance. And so when a block theme comes out, or a plugin comes out, or maybe a combo that I'm interested in learning, I spin up a new multi-site instance within that and activate it that way. And basically, this enables me to do a couple of things, right? I don't have to set up a whole new site over and over again. And, if you're resource constrained, you don't have enough hard drive space, that's pretty important. Maybe it's a memory issue, but either way, that multi-site approach lets you have uniformity in all your plugins.
Yep.
And you don't have to have them active on every site if you don't want to. But it gives me a really solid test bed. So I can, approach things like I would scaffold a production site. But I don't have all the overhead, expenditure of that time and energy over and over again. Second thing I would do is you definitely need to read up. And I cannot name everyone from memory right now. My brain is a bit fuzzy, but of course, Burgett is a great source. What is that?
Gutenberg Times.
Gutenberg Times.
Yeah.
And then what's the? Let's see. There's what's the block? There's a block learning website. I wish I could remember.
I cannot.
But doesn't Carolina run it?
Yeah, Carolina does. Yeah.
Carolina
Nymark, right?
Right. Yes. And so that's an excellent resource. I really hate the fact that I cannot remember the name of it off the top of my head. Yes. But I think it's like Learn WordPress Block, something like that.
Yeah. I know. So learn.wordpress.org is a good place to go, I would say.
Yeah. Learn.wordpress.org. But there's really no substitute than just by doing, right? But I think things like accessing the patterns are still a little bit esoteric enough that you need to have a guide and in the onboarding. But I'll put this out there. Hopefully it doesn't come back to bite me. I do sessions for people a lot. Chris, I want to say, Wigman.
The engine. Yeah.
Yeah. He's on the engineering side. He works for Headless Space, so he doesn't work with blocks as much. And he was experiencing some pain with trying to learn and just not being satisfied with the experience. And I said, hey, give me a copy of your site, and I will set up 3 different themes and show you how all of these differ and what your site looks like in them, and we'll look at what it weighs, right? I think his homebrew theme is like something ridiculous. It's like 35K.
Yeah, it's huge.
I don't know if I have that right. He'll probably correct me, but no, I mean, it's tiny. His homepage is 35 kilobytes.
Okay.
Right. And it's so hard to match that even with a block theme. I think the closest we got was Rich Tabor's Wabi was around 100K. And that was with a demo of Chris's site. And then I did a demo for Vito from Adoram. And we like kind of mocked up his corporate site using one of the I Know themes, just to show him what it would look like. I'll show anybody who needs some quick onboarding how to use blocks. So feel free to come to me. I'm not really an expert on the level that some of these other folks are, but I'm happy to do a video session.
Yeah, I've spent some time, and I've had the pleasure, even on this podcast, I've talked to Burgett about blocks. I had Matthias Ventura, the lead Gutenberg lead, on with me late last year, and we talked blocks. I think also following the right people on social, people like Burgett, people like Caroline, people like Courtney and Pooja Robertson, who run Learn WordPress.org. There's a third lady, and Courtney's going to shoot me the minute she hears this, but that's okay. I'm sorry. People like the Brian Gardners and the Nick Diegos of the world. People like Rich
Yeah,
Tabor,
Brian Cords, Rob Howard,
Rob Howard, yeah, Rich Tabor,
mhm,
yeah. I mean, and
Rich,
and these
the post
people.
status folks.
Oh yeah, post status. I don't know where I'd be without post status. You know, a shout out to Corey and that crew. And there's a lot of good people out there, and a lot of good people will get in the conversation. So the best thing I can say is get in those conversations, even if you just listen. And I was commenting before we went to record on last Friday's build. I was pretty quiet because we were talking about fonts, and fonts is a subject I always get hung up on. So I was more digesting than I had my usual lot to say, but get involved in that and learn. Like, the people will learn with you, and everybody's learning how to do this. So, and say, I need help. People jump in and help. I think.
Yeah, I mean, every day I'm learning something new related to Gutenberg, or blocks. I still fall into that naming trap. But it really, it does help immensely to have such a generous community. In some of my, I guess, more emo moods, I get a little teary eyed about how awesome it is. That I don't think at any point in my career I have known so many people who are willing to just give parts of themselves in such great quantities to help other people get ahead in their careers for no other reason than to just lift other people up, right? And so I mean, just they're like, the list that we rattled off was too short. There's so many people, that we overlooked. And so I do want to plug, I have a Twitter list. I think you follow it. It's called WordPress Humans.
I certainly do. Yeah.
And so usually when I'm tired of the main timeline, that's what I'm on. Because that's really what I'm there for. Right. Is to not miss out on that community. I took a Twitter fast, and it was good for a lot of reasons, but I really missed the community.
I agree.
And follow that, follow everybody on that list, and in fairly short order, you too will be part of not only the WordPress community, but you will be on the leading edge of block expertise.
Yeah. And there's a big WordPress community on Twitter. There's now a big WordPress community on LinkedIn that Courtney and I have been moderating and building. Last I looked, we're about 800 shy of 10,000 in that group. So that group's growing, which is nice to see. And it's away from the spammy stuff on LinkedIn we're all accustomed to and get fed up with by the day, me included. So, and like, get in some of these conversations. I mean, reach out to people. And most of the dev advocates from most of the hosting companies have a pretty open door policy. So if you have a question, like, reach out to them or reach out to somebody like Birgit and say help. I know last week I was in a conversation with Anne McCarthy up at Automatic on something I was stumped on that she put out, and I kind of said, Anne, help. And people will help. The outlying thing with WordPress is the community. Everything else is great, but our community's pretty special at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think it really is. It's a testament to the intent behind it, right? I lost my train of thought, but suffice it to say, the essentially the beginner level access blends right into that intermediate access. and you'll find yourself in GitHub comments for both Gutenberg and other plugins, and you'll get to know people in fairly short order that way, really easily as well. Yeah. So it is, for all the beginners, whether you're a WordPress beginner or just a block beginner, one foot in front of the other.
And the other thing I would kind of urge anybody to do is, if you find a problem, please don't just tweet about it. Actually open up a ticket so that the core team can address those problems. And I know they're going to hate me, but if you have any problems opening a ticket, reach out to one of the dev advocates. They'll help. They'll gladly help you. And, and that's what they're there for. So, say, help, I don't know how to open a ticket. I want to document this problem. Please do it, because then we can make WordPress even a better platform than it is now.
Well said.
Yeah, so I think that's important. So, Tom, thanks for an amazing conversation tonight. Really appreciate it. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, how's the best way?
You can find me on Twitter at Tom Finley, TomFinley. You can also find me via proofcreative.com. That's PRUF creative.com.
Thanks, Tom. Have an amazing night, and we'll talk to you soon.
You too, Rob.
Bye.
Thanks.
This episode of the SDM Show is sponsored by Stunning Digital Marketing, the agency to handle all your WordPress website security needs. Go on over to stunningdigitalmarketing.com and find out how we can help you secure your website so you no longer have an issue with backups, being hacked, or your website being compromised. That's stunningdigitalmarketing.com. A very special thank you to Tom for joining me on this edition of the SDM Show. Thank you for listening to this edition of the SDM Show. The SDM Show is brought to you by Rob Cairns and Stunning Digital Marketing. For more information about Rob Cairns and Stunning Digital Marketing, go to stunningdigitalmarketing.info. From here, you can connect to us on social media, go to our website, and even go to the podcast to subscribe. This podcast is dedicated to my late father, Bruce Cairns. Dad, I miss you very much. Keep your feet on the ground. Keep reaching for the stars. Make your business succeed.